Have you ever wondered what secrets a single photograph could hold? Imagine a sepia-toned image taken on a warm September day in 1904 Charleston, showing a seemingly ordinary family on their Victorian porch. At first glance, everything appears calm, familiar, even comforting. But if you look closely, hidden in the shadows behind the family is a figure watching silently, a presence that seems both deliberate and impossible. This photograph, lost for over a century, would later reveal ties to Charleston's bustling harbor, secret maritime operations, and a federal investigation that shook the city to its core. Behind the cheerful smiles of children and the pride of a family patriarch lies a web of hidden surveillance, covert operations, and choices that would alter a family's fate for generations. As we unfold the story of the Thornton family, of shadowed observers and whispered secrets, you may begin to ask yourself, what would you see if you looked closer at your own family photographs? Before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from today? It was in the sweltering quiet of a Charleston attic one July afternoon in 2024 that genealogist Sarah Mitchell made a discovery that would unsettle a century of accepted photographic history. Among the dust-softened trunks and fading letters of her late grandmother's possessions, she came across a single, unassuming photograph. At first glance, it seemed perfectly ordinary, a sepia-toned portrait of the Thornton family, taken on the porch of their stately Victorian home in 1904. There was William Thornton, a respected Charleston merchant, standing tall beside his wife Margaret, their 2 sons, and a little girl, clutching a porcelain doll. Their expressions were calm, composed, that familiar, dignified stillness of early photography. Everything about the picture spoke of a typical Southern family at the turn of the century. But when Sarah tilted the image under a proper light, she noticed something wrong. Behind the family, partly obscured by the shadow of a porch column, was another figure. A man dressed in dark clothing, barely visible unless one knew precisely where to look. That single presence changed everything. In 1904, portrait photography was no casual affair. Every pose was deliberate, every composition carefully arranged. Strangers did not simply appear in family photographs. And yet, here he was, silent, unnoticed, watching. When Dr. James Harrison, a photography historian at the College of Charleston, later examined the image, he called its clarity extraordinary for its time. Cameras in 1904 rarely captured such fine detail, yet this one did. And in that detail, the figure in the shadows seemed almost intentional. The family, however, appeared utterly unaware. Their gazes faced forward, serene, composed, while the man behind them watched from the dark. That photograph would become the beginning of a slow, unsettling investigation, one that would draw open a century-old secret buried deep within Charleston's archives. Dr. Harrison, who had spent decades studying early photographic techniques, approached Sarah's discovery with professional skepticism. But that skepticism soon turned to fascination. Under magnification, the shadowed man became clear, his features sharp enough to suggest a formal suit, a bowler hat, and a posture that was deliberate, almost staged. Harrison began tracing the photograph's origin. Only a handful of Charleston studios in 1904 possessed the technology to achieve such crisp imagery. By cross-referencing the Thornton family's social circles with surviving business records, one name surfaced again and again: Marcus Whitmore, proprietor of the city's most prestigious portrait studio. The ledgers from the Charleston Historical Society confirmed it. September 15th, 1904. Thornton family session. Special arrangement requested. That small note, barely legible in Whitmore's handwriting, became the thread that began to unravel the story. Whitmore's clientele were among Charleston's elite merchants, ship owners, and families tied to the booming maritime trade. And William Thornton, as it turned out, was deeply connected to that world, running a prosperous shipping supply business that served the routes between Charleston and New York. But it wasn't the business connections that caught Harrison's attention. It was a small, cryptic detail buried in Whitmore's records, a reference to a second photographer who occasionally assisted during certain private sessions. He was never named, only described in Whitmore's notes as the shadow operator. The shadow operator, as he was whispered about in studio records, allegedly had a singular unsettling talent, capturing subjects without their awareness. No official documentation confirmed his identity, nor the true purpose behind his presence. And yet, with each detail Sarah uncovered, it became harder to dismiss the possibility that the figure lurking behind the Thorntons was tied to something larger. Something rooted in Charleston's bustling maritime world. City records from 1904 painted William Thornton in a more complex light than a simple merchant. His company, Thornton Maritime Provisions, supplied essential goods to steamships traversing the eastern seaboard, from cargo-laden freighters to passenger vessels traveling between southern ports and northern cities. The document spoke of a business flourishing during Charleston's maritime boom. The early 1900s had transformed the city into a vital hub for cotton exports, manufactured goods, and ever-increasing commercial traffic. Rope canvas, navigational tools, provisions. Thornton supplied them all. His personal life too was deeply entwined with the harbor. He had married Margaret Sullivan in 1892, a woman from a family who ran a boarding house catering primarily to sailors and dock workers. The Thorntons were not merely observers of the port's activity, they were at the very heart of its rhythm and secrets. Their home, where the now famous photograph was taken, stood along Meeting Street, overlooking Charleston Harbor. The surrounding neighborhood was populated by other maritime entrepreneurs, ship captains, and harbor officials, a network of influence and commerce intertwined with the ebb and flow of the sea. The Thorntons' children, William Jr., 16, Thomas, 12, and Elizabeth, 8, attended the prestigious Porter Academy, performing admirably in their studies, a subtle reminder of the family's social standing. Yet, beneath this polished surface, history whispered hints of something more complicated. Harbourmaster logs from the summer and fall of 1904 revealed unusual patterns in shipping traffic. Ships arrived at odd hours without proper documentation, sometimes at night, sometimes seemingly at random. Contemporary newspapers noted that federal inspectors were paying closer attention to Charleston's harbor activity, though the reports were often vague, offering only glimpses of government scrutiny. The timing of the photograph became ever more intriguing. Taken in September 1904, just as federal interest in the port peaked, the image might have captured more than a simple family gathering. Harbourmaster Jonathan Blackwood's daily logs, preserved in the South Carolina State Archives, chronicled irregularities the week of the Thorntons' portrait session. On September 12, 1904, 3 days before the photograph, the steamship Northern Star arrived unscheduled from New York. Its cargo manifest claimed ordinary merchandise, yet customs inspectors noted discrepancies in weights and contents. Adding to the tension, revenue agent Samuel Foster had been assigned to Charleston that month, tasked with investigating suspected smuggling operations. Foster's reports, declassified in 1954, mentioned surveillance of multiple maritime supply businesses, including those serving the Northern Star. Smuggling, it seemed, was rampant along the eastern seaboard in 1904, often involving luxury goods meant to bypass import tariffs. Charleston's port offered distinct advantages: countless small inlets, an established maritime infrastructure, and a network of local businesses that, willingly or not, facilitated the covert passage of contraband. And now, as Sarah looked again at the Thornton family photograph, the shadowed man in the corner seemed to linger with new significance. Was he merely a silent observer, or a witness, perhaps even a participant in the unseen movements of Charleston's harbor? As Sarah and Dr. Harrison delved deeper, the threads of the investigation began to intertwine in unexpected ways. Records revealed that William Thornton's maritime provisions had supplied the Northern Star during its unscheduled September visit. Estate papers showed payments for deliveries at unusual hours, hinting at operations beyond ordinary commerce. Newspaper accounts of the time added another layer of intrigue. The Charleston Evening Post reported a noticeable federal presence at the harbor in September 1904, describing heightened vigilance over irregular maritime activities. Business leaders publicly supported the inspections, but behind closed doors, voiced concerns about government interference. Among the most striking discoveries were revenue agent Samuel Foster's reports, which mentioned surveillance of the Thornton residence. Its elevated position overlooking the harbor made it an ideal vantage point for monitoring vessel movements and harbor activities. Could it be? Sarah wondered that the shadowed figure captured in the family photograph was linked to these federal operations. The timing during a period of peak investigation seemed far too precise to be mere coincidence. Foster had arrived in Charleston on August 30th, 1904, tasked with investigating suspected smuggling of luxury goods. His notes, meticulous and daily, described a network of local businesses facilitating irregular maritime operations. Ship chandlers, warehouse operators, and transport companies, all playing their part. The reports outlined a sophisticated system: goods such as textiles, jewelry, and imported spirits were transported under the guise of legitimate cargo, diverted at key moments to evade customs inspections, and then entered Charleston's markets without tariffs. While Thornton Maritime Provisions was not directly accused of smuggling, its unusual delivery schedule and access to the harbor made it invaluable for observation. Employees often worked at night loading supplies under the cover of darkness, and federal agents recognized September 1904 as a critical period for gathering evidence. Foster's investigation extended beyond mere observation. Local informants, harbor workers, boarding house operators, even photographers were recruited to discreetly monitor activity. Agents sometimes posed as tradesmen or business associates, blending seamlessly into Charleston's maritime community to document operations without arousing suspicion. Records show the federal investigation culminated in late September 1904, with the seizure of contraband valued at over $50,000, equivalent to roughly $1.8 million today. Several local businesses faced charges, though many details remained classified for decades. This raised a chilling possibility. Could the shadowy man in the Thornton family photograph be none other than Agent Samuel Foster himself, quietly observing, documenting, unseen? modern technology offered new answers. Forensic imaging specialist Dr. Elena Rodriguez at the FBI's Charleston field office used digital enhancement techniques unavailable to earlier investigators. Her work isolated the mysterious figure in the photograph, revealing a man around 35 to 40 years old, clad in a dark wool suit, the attire typical of federal agents in 1904. Most intriguingly, he held a small notebook and pencil, actively recording rather than simply watching. Dr. Rodriguez's analysis also highlighted subtleties in the photograph's composition. The placement of shadows, the careful framing, and the deliberate angles that allowed the man to remain hidden yet present. Every element seemed to suggest intentional surveillance quietly unfolding in the background of an ordinary family portrait. And so, the Thornton family photograph, once a simple keepsake, became a window into a hidden world of shadowed observers, covert operations, and a city at the heart of a maritime mystery. Careful examination of the photograph suggested something almost impossible. The shadowed figure had not stumbled into the frame by accident. The lighting, the positioning, everything indicated intentional inclusion. Dr. Elena Rodriguez explained almost in a whisper. This wasn't accidental. Someone wanted him captured in the image, even if only subtly. When the enhanced photograph was compared to known portraits of revenue agent Samuel Foster, drawn from federal personnel records, the similarities were striking. Height, build, facial features, they matched the mysterious figure with uncanny precision. Historical logs from September 1904 provided context for why Foster might have been at the Thornton residence. Federal surveillance records showed that he had established observation posts at multiple locations overlooking Charleston Harbor. The Thornton house, perched above the harbor with clear sightlines, would have been ideal for monitoring vessel movements. Further investigation revealed that Foster had cultivated relationships with several Charleston families. These connections offered both cover and access, allowing him to discreetly gather intelligence about the city's maritime operations without raising suspicion. Even photographer Marcus Whitmore's studio records contained hints that had gone unnoticed for decades. One entry described a special commission requested by a federal associate during the Thornton family session, an instruction to document specific individuals present at the photograph. In other words, the portrait served a dual purpose, a keepsake for the family and subtle documentation for the federal investigation. The timing of the photograph was particularly revealing. Taken on September 15, 1904, exactly 1 week before a major seizure of contraband, it captured a fleeting moment where family life and federal law enforcement intersected in early 20th century Charleston. Federal case files from the 1904 contraband investigation revealed the scope of the operation. Charleston merchants, ship captains, and harbor officials had been diverting luxury goods from legitimate cargo shipments. The network's ringleader was identified as Captain Marcus Sullivan, Margaret Thornton's brother, a veteran steamship captain who regularly sailed between Charleston and New York. Sullivan leveraged his legitimate shipping connections to coordinate smuggling, sharing schedules, inspection patterns, and vessel arrival times. William Thornton's role proved more complex than initially suspected. While his company, Thornton Maritime Provisions, genuinely supplied ships at Charleston Harbor, investigators discovered that his warehouses and transportation networks were used to store and move smuggled goods, contraband was temporarily held near the harbor before distribution to Charleston merchants, often moving alongside legitimate shipments in carefully timed operations. The smuggling network had been running efficiently for over 2 years by 1904, generating enormous profits. Customs documents calculated the avoided tariffs at over $200,000 millions in today's money. And there, in the quiet shadows of the Thornton family photograph, Samuel Foster stood not merely observing, but actively embedded in the household at the climax of his investigation. His position partially concealed symbolized the covert penetration of the smuggling network, the quiet, unseen hand of law enforcement recording the unfolding of Charleston's hidden maritime world. A single photograph, once thought to be a simple family keepsake, had silently captured a web of commerce deception and federal vigilance frozen forever in sepia tones. The dawn of September 22, 1904, brought the unfolding of events that had been quietly set in motion by shadows and observation. Exactly 1 week after the family photograph was taken, federal raids began across Charleston, striking simultaneously at warehouses, private homes, and maritime businesses. William Thornton was arrested at his maritime supply business. Hidden compartments carefully crafted to conceal smuggled silk jewelry and imported spirits, valued at over $15,000, were discovered by federal agents. Captain Marcus Sullivan, the ringleader of the operation, was apprehended aboard his steamship, the Coastal Pride, as it prepared to leave Charleston Harbor. Detailed records meticulously kept by the smugglers documented schedules, contacts, and financial transactions. A web of illicit commerce that had silently operated in the city for years. The arrests sent shockwaves through Charleston's maritime community. Newspapers reported the events as the largest federal law enforcement action in recent memory, shaking even the most respected business leaders. Margaret Thornton and the children faced no charges, yet their lives were irrevocably changed. The family's social standing crumbled. Their Meeting Street home was seized and financial ruin followed as the legal proceedings dragged into early 1905. William Thornton was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, while Captain Sullivan received 10 years for orchestrating the smuggling network. Several other businessmen were given lesser sentences, their names quietly fading from public notice. The Thornton family, once central to Charleston's maritime life, had lost everything. Margaret Thornton, left to raise 3 children alone, struggled against the weight of scandal and the whispers of the city. She relocated her family to a modest house on Charleston's outskirts, far from the harbor that had once brought them prosperity and now humiliation. The children adapted in different ways. William Jr., 17 at the time, changed his name to William Thompson and moved to Atlanta, leaving Charleston and his family history behind. Thomas, 13, remained with his mother, later becoming a railroad clerk, marrying quietly and rarely speaking of his father. His children grew up knowing only that their grandfather had died young. Elizabeth, 9, perhaps, suffered the most. Withdrawn from school due to financial constraints, her education was limited, and she married early, carrying little knowledge of her Charleston roots. Margaret imposed strict silence over the events of 1904, instructing her children never to speak of their father's imprisonment or their family's former life. That silence endured for more than a century. Meanwhile, Revenue Agent Samuel Foster continued his federal career, eventually becoming a supervisor in the Treasury Department's Customs Enforcement Division. His reports on the Charleston investigation remained classified until the 1950s, when they were finally released to the National Archives as historical documents, and the photograph, hidden away by Margaret Thornton, endured. It was the only visual record of a prosperous past interrupted by tragedy. A single sepia image capturing family life, federal surveillance, and the unraveling of a hidden smuggling network. When Sarah Mitchell discovered the photograph in 2024, she uncovered a chapter of Charleston history, long buried, a story of commerce secrecy and law enforcement. She realized that her great-great-grandfather William Thornton had been part of a federal smuggling investigation, and that the mysterious figure in the photograph, Agent Foster, had been silently observing them all along. The findings were donated to the Charleston Historical Society, becoming part of the permanent record of the city's maritime heritage. Dr. James Harrison published an article in the Journal of Southern History, noting the photograph's significance as an artifact capturing the intersection of family life and federal law enforcement in early 20th century America. For Sarah, the discovery offered more than historical insight. It explained her grandmother's silence, the family's cautious reticence, and the mystery surrounding their Southern ancestry. The photograph, enhanced to reveal Agent Foster in the shadows, became a symbol of truth hidden in plain sight. A reminder that history, like the faint sepia tones of an old image, often holds secrets waiting for the patient eye. Charleston's tourism board embraced the story as part of the city's rich past, and the original Thornton House on Meeting Street received a historical marker commemorating its role in the 1904 federal investigation. But perhaps the most profound legacy of the photograph was personal. For the Thornton descendants, it offered understanding, not shame but pride. A story of prosperity, misjudgment, consequence, and resilience, reflecting the complexities of the American experience. And now, as the photograph hangs in Sarah Mitchell's Charleston home, it quietly whispers the tale of a family, a city, and a shadowed figure who watched history unfold.